Here we go.
Okay, so Australia at the moment has a series of serious man-made problems. Problems created, like, seemingly deliberately by stupid or evil, just weak globalist leaders. It has an energy crisis, an immigration crisis, a cost of living crisis, a housing crisis, and a serious government corruption problem. These problems are leading to other problems as well. The mass immigration crisis of Islamic individuals is directly attacking free speech with hate speech laws, with terms like Islamophobia, which is absolutely ridiculous. Christians are more persecuted than Muslims, by attempting to outlaw offensive speech. The police enforcing this are empowered to do this, to do so just because the population is completely disarmed, has no means to self-defense, and has no right to self-defense. Meaning police have the comfortable path of least resistance choice to enforce with force policy we never actually consented to and actively don't consent to or agree with. Shit, that's just, Nazis rounding up Jews in Europe, essentially. It's literally no different to that. Literally no different to that. We're innocent, we have the right to free speech, and they've decided that our free speech is criminal and they're just rounding us up. In addition to that, we have Chinese warships off of our coast, I think in the New Zealand area, so to the right, to the east there somewhere. And our media is largely ignoring it, despite it being pretty much no different to when, you know, Russia massed tanks and shit on the border with Crimea. It's like literally no different to that. Our media is just ignoring it because our media is completely fucking compromised. Our politicians are ignoring it as well, implying that they are also seriously compromised. And now we have a weird cyclone hitting that area, implying that, look, the weather weapons were real. They used them in Vietnam to destroy crops. Do they have energy weather weapons now? Possibly. And having a look just at the series of events, we know that there are Chinese warships off of our coast to the east, and then from the east Brisbane area there is a cyclone seemingly out of nowhere hitting that area. In addition to that, we have allowed Marxists to empower Aboriginals with race communism to make unrealistic demands that we never consented to, and we have them also seemingly counter-protesting violently every sensible protest without police intervention, punishment for the counter-protesters, etc. Essentially, we have a government complicit series of black shirts, either counter-protesting or protesting violently. Similar to that, we have Islamists openly proclaiming support for Palestinians and their elected terrorist group government of Hamas, which is a prescribed terror group, and we are subsidizing all of this with the taxpayer. To make the situation fucking way worse, we need to get better policy. To get better policy, we would need a majority of senators, etc., voting on policy and legislation, which we don't have. We have a vast majority of retarded leftist, suicidal, corrupt senators, and in order to reverse this terrible policy they've pushed without our consent, which is, you know, just obviously terrible policy, which is going to destroy Australia, we would need a majority of senators to reverse their policy, which we don't have. Meaning a majority of corrupt senators get to implement policy and laws we don't consent to, such as, you know, the hate speech laws. The hate speech laws, which famously had a massive petition against them, subsequently got dropped after the massive petition went through, and then a couple of months later they snuck it through without a fucking debate. So yeah, go get fucked. We don't consent to that, and we're seriously considering whether you're a legitimate government or not. In addition to that, we have no free speech in our constitution. We have a vague Magna Carta sense of free speech, and we have an implied sense of free speech. We don't have a clear Bill of Rights and free speech in this country. So that's a serious fucking issue. And if all that weren't fucking bad enough, and believe me, all of that is seriously fucked, our Supreme Court is also corrupt as fuck and has sided on the wrong side of pretty much all these issues, like the vaccine mandates, hate speech, all that sort of shit. This is the same Supreme Court that reversed the decision on Cardinal Pell, famously reversed the decision on Cardinal Pell after one of the accusers and victims of Cardinal Pell died and was no longer able to act in the trial. They waited for him to die and then reversed the decision against Cardinal Pell's conviction. So that's a fucking very serious problem. Very obvious corruption in the Supreme Court. You cannot rely on them to be the ultimate impartial arbiter of any law and order. So that's a lot of serious problems that interlock with interlocking fields of fire to back each other up, sort of thing. We have a bunch of serious social policy problems, and we have a corrupt government, and we have a system of government that doesn't allow for easy reversal. So, how do we fix it? Well, the obvious easy one would be to get Trump to buy or invade Australia and then install Doge. Ultimately, our country would then be subservient to the American Supreme Court. The American Supreme Court has a famous 5-4 advantage for conservatives, meaning that, in theory, any legal case could be elevated to the American Supreme Court, where things could be fixed. Stupid shit could be fixed. In addition to that, we would be under their Constitution and Bill of Rights at that point, meaning we would have the right to free speech, which would then take with it all the precedent in America for free speech. And at that point, we would also have the Second Amendment as well, meaning we would have the right to bear arms, which would make any unreasonable use of police force extremely risky for the police to engage in. In addition to that, you have most states in America have the right to self-defense. The self-defense would apply to a corrupt police force in theory. So at that point, you literally have a mechanism to push back against all the corrupt totalitarian state fucking bullshit that is happening in order to fix it. In addition to that, you have things like a Muslim ban. It would give you immediately more taxpayer money and reduce the demands on housing. People would view that sort of racist, but Muslims aren't net tax contributors at all, and they seem to be seriously attempting to install Sharia and eroding our individual rights to resist government, which is the basic idea. The American Constitution Bill of Rights resist tyrannical government, but also eroding the rights of free speech just by pushing their blasphemy laws, death penalty for blasphemers, death penalty for criticizing Muhammad, death penalty for burning Qurans, that sort of deal. Step 2 towards that, which is basically a similar step, we would deport Muslim immigrants and revoke the citizenships of dual citizen Muslims. That's either support Hamas, that are already here, or... So what does that do? It immediately gives you more tax money through net non-contributing tax people, reduces the demand on healthcare, which is actually serious when you consider the Muslim population due to first cousin marriage. They literally have like 3 times higher rate of birth defects and that sort of deal, Down syndrome, etc. So you immediately save on Medicare and NDIS. You need fewer police, and you would cut down national security costs to monitor the extremists if you didn't have like an openly complicit population in terms of terrorism acting in your country. You wouldn't also have, Australian taxpayer money subsidising and building mosques, literally funding our own cultural destruction by Muslims. You only need to look at other Muslim countries to see that this isn't alarmism. They have ethnically cleansed Christians in pretty much every one of their Muslim majority countries. And just the other week, there was like a massacre of 70 Christians in the Congo by a Muslim terrorist group. So they've got hard and soft methods of ethnic cleansing. The soft ones are that you're taxed extra, that you're not allowed to build new churches, that you're not allowed to repair existing churches, etc. Then on top of that, you would have the hard ones, which are the pogroms, the ethnic cleansings, and the deliberate destruction and targetings of churches and stuff like that by terrorist groups. So it's like hard and soft ethnic cleansing that works hand in hand sort of deal. Step 3 would be sort of working under terrorism charges. You would look at specific mosques where these terrorist individuals came from, and you would remove all those mosques' tax-exempt statuses. Now, I know what you're thinking. That seems like soft ethnic cleansing, just like what Muslims do to Christians in Muslim countries. I'm fine with it. I don't really fucking care at this point. I don't like them. Also, why are we giving them tax-exempt status if they're literally complicit with supporting, maybe radicalising people in those mosques to do terrorist attacks on Australian soil, terrorist attacks on the West, that sort of deal. Pushing the ideology, the Muslim ideology of conquering the Christian free West. Like, why would we ever want those people here? Why would we ever want them here? And that's not even to mention, you know, the two-tiered taxing of Christians in Muslim societies, the jizya. That's not even mentioning that. Like, it's literally as bad as, if not worse than, Nazi ideology. It's Islamic supremacist ideology, where people are subservient to Muslims in that ideology. It's absolutely fucking trash. The values of Muslims are fucking trash. They support a pedophile sex slave that bought, sold, captured, enslaved, and raped sex slaves. That's their ideal conduct of a man. Islam is just fucking complete garbage. Complete garbage in terms of values. There's none of this redemption, tell the truth thing that's in Christianity. There's no English common law in Muslim ideology. It's absolutely disgusting. Step 4 would be to reduce total immigration. Like, the housing crisis is simply supply and demand, right? And since the corrupt government, you know, all the taxpayer money they're taking, they cannot seem to manage to build more homes, so they cannot seem to increase supply. If they can't do that, and they already have control of borders with visas, and simply reduce the demand by reducing the amount of visas, by either deporting criminals, deporting terrorists, or just flat out cutting immigration. Like, it really is that simple. They would reduce the demand by doing that, and thereby reduce the cost of housing. But they seem to be doing the complete opposite of that, meaning that it is obviously an artificially created crisis. In addition to that, you could consider doing what Trump's doing with the visas, giving specific wealthy individuals citizenship through, you know, expensive visas. What was it? Trump's idea, the gold class visas. Or you could just way increase the tax. We're talking like 2 or 3 times tax on the foreign entities that are owning land here, meaning that they're either soft, what would you say, disincentivized from owning land, or we just raise a ton of tax revenue about that. Our government's so corrupt at the moment with spending and that sort of shit. Like, the amount of shit that just hasn't been finished, or has, you know, gone way overdue and all that sort of shit. Like, I wouldn't trust them to spend the money anymore, but at least we'd be getting the money out of them, and we would be disincentivizing foreigners from owning land. The next step would be to cut the benefits to immigrants and refugees. So Albanese recently brought in like 26,000 Afghani refugees, which is absolutely fucking terrible because, you know, under the Taliban, stoning, child marriage, all that sort of shit was completely legal. So there's no way to properly screen these individuals from bringing those absolutely terrible, incompatible values to Australia. Also, like, in addition to that, Muslims are generally net non-tax contributors. This is due just to the sheer amount of women not being able to work, to go to university, under the Taliban, to have jobs, like in Afghanistan and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So you want to disincentivize you want to get rid of the incentives for them to come here and abuse it. Also, those cultures tend to have multiple wives, meaning you would probably have multiple welfare recipients in the one household. Not to mention that Muslims, you know, tend to majority support and obfuscate with taqiyya, terrorism, and Sharia and ethnic cleansings of other cultures and minorities in their states. Yeah, it just looks like an absolutely atrocious decision by our government. Literally financially subsidizing our own cultural destruction and economic destruction. It's a fucking absolutely terrible idea. There's no upside to it, and in order to fix it, it would cost money to fix it, and the optics of fixing it, deporting Muslims, looks really bad and racist. So they've just created just a fucking massive problem for like no gain, no upper hand to that. It's fucking absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely disgusting. The next step would be the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis. I could say things like, cut subsidy to stupid green energy shit. That never pays itself off, can't be recycled, all that sort of thing. Needs to be replaced every like 15 to 20 years. Expensive to replace, can't recycle the goods in it, like all that sort of shit. Like, we are rich in coal and we are rich in uranium ore. Like, just by funding regular coal stations, if you don't give too much of a shit about climate change, or if you do give a shit about climate change, nuclear reactors like France had, where France had it like down pat, they were like using the nuclear energy and then they were re-enriching the waste and reusing the waste. Like, you could do something like that. Instead, we're just funding this stupid fucking solar panels and wind turbines, which only work when it's windy. We don't have the battery infrastructure to support it. That sort of deal. But, like, in addition to that, we have retarded leftist radicals just pushing absolute bullshit that the majority of us simply just do not agree with or consent to. So we need, like, some sort of mechanism by which we can, like, sort of easily reverse their absolutely fucking terrible policy in, like, a democratic way that doesn't rely on representation, which can just be simply corrupt. But it can be used as a method, just sort of democratically, that the people can vote on. I suppose that still relies on, the votes and referendum and stuff not to be corrupt. But like something like a what are they called? Referendum. Like, let's say you have a really unpopular Democrat policy. Let's say the Democrats just sort of, the Labour in our country, let's just say Labour completely outlawed free speech and enforced it with, the iron will and force of the law behind it. Started putting people in prison for like, tenors and quarters for criticising government, for criticising left-wing policy, that sort of deal. I would propose that like we have some sort of referendum type deal where if you get 60, it's just the people voting, there's no Democrats, there's no corrupt representation, there's no controlled opposition. You just get the individual people voting, and they vote in like a referendum type deal, and in this referendum you can just reverse policy, right? Just reverse absolute shit policy, like the ability for the government to put you in prison for speech. Let's just say you have a massive referendum on that, should the government have the ability to put you in jail for speech. And then let's say if it's like 65 to 70% of the vote are against it, then that policy gets reversed. And we just have like a mechanism for that. Because the current state of policy is we elect representatives. The representatives usually wind up being corrupt because they're either controlled puppets or whatever. And then they push through absolutely dogshit policy that we, don't consent to. And like by this method, we will be able to, reclaim free speech rights, reclaim gun rights, etc. Like either that, or we get America to invade us, and then we are under the Constitution once again. And then at that point, we can raise it to the conservative Supreme Court, and we can reintroduce gun rights and things like that to Australia. Obviously that way is very expensive, but at least you have a method for doing it, right? Unlike our current system where we have to rely on a completely corrupt, left-biased Supreme Court that just seems to be on the wrong side of every issue, just out of sheer corruption. Like, I have no faith in that Supreme Court. In addition to that, you could, get self-defense, the right to self-defense and all that sort of thing reintroduced. Like the liberal idea that you shouldn't have the right to self-defense, like what they're trying to do in California at the moment, where they're saying even if someone like home invades you, you don't have the right to defend yourself. You have to exhaust all possible means of escape before you fucking kill that motherfucker that's like in your home, wanting to either rob or rape or kill you. Like, that's absolutely fucking ridiculous. Like, why would you ever consent to stupid fucking laws like that? That's just a fucking absolutely retarded liberal idea. And then obviously after all that, you've got your, you could do a referendum to adopt the American Bill of Rights, free speech, gun rights, that sort of thing. And then after that, like, in order to get any of this off the ground, you've got to make sure you have popular support first. In order to make sure you have popular support first, you would need to completely defund the radical fucking unis and everything that are programming people to be basically retarded communist revolutionaries at the moment. So you would have to defund like radical art and Marxist courses at universities. It might not be a bad idea while you're at it to, just blanket defund mosques and Muslim colleges as well, especially if you can draw like a straight line between those mosques and Muslim colleges and like terrorists. Like, even if you don't have a like one-to-one, like even if you don't have terrorist groups directly inspired and directly indoctrinated at those colleges, it would still be a good idea to defund them. Like, even if you say it's peripheral, like they have family or stuff like that. Yeah. And step 9, they could look to be more aggressive with violent protesters and counter-protesters. Like, if you're going to go to a protest, it should be like against the law that you cover your face, right? Everyone should know who you are. And I suppose that would be a fucking bad thing in totalitarian states where you can get arrested for, thoughts and speech and all that sort of thing. Hello, Australia. Yeah, we're almost there. But it would also cut down the left's ability to violently counter-protest and act as black shirts to regular grassroots protests, right? Because how it functions now is they basically come in, they're all masked up, they're all hooded up, they usually all get out of the same car. They're all usually weirdly, fighting age men. It's odd. They're either fighting age men or, trans people or whatever. And first of all, they just verbally assault people. They get in people's faces with microphones and that sort of shit and yell at them, which in itself should be a form of assault. Like, it's, oral assault, I guess you call it, audio assault. Particularly if you can damage hearing with that sort of stupid shit. But after that, they always get physical, they always get up in their faces, always put, fingers in their chests and all that sort of shit. Yeah, that's unacceptable, that's brown shirt behaviour. It should be, just blanket treated under terrorism. Just ban face masks, that should fix it, but if that doesn't fix it, just ban it under, terrorism charges. Particularly if you can seize electronics and prove it. But yeah, there's some ideas on how to fix Australia.